Hello Zero Books readers, it's me again, Douglas Lane, and in this video I'll be taking excerpts from Mark Fisher's Capitalist Realism and Eugene Thacker's In the Dust of This Planet in order to tackle one big question. Is human life meaningful? These days, there are lots of problems vying for our attention. But underneath them all, in the background, there's really only one big question.
To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end.
The French existentialist philosopher Albert Camus once said that deciding whether or not life is worth living is to answer the fundamental question in philosophy. But it's not a question that often comes up on the left. Perhaps this is because so many leftists have answered in the negative. Guy Debord, for example, once said that the choice facing us is not to be or not to be, but suicide or revolution. Debord, of course, took his own life in 1994.
Hey, they keep pushing me, but I just want to sign up for the open mic.
No, the Democrats are never violent, like the Black Lives Matter events and attacking the Trump people.
I'm not a Democrat either. I'm a nihilist.
Traditionalists and conservatives often accuse the left of being nihilists. They accuse the left of being the source of nihilism, the reason why so many people have difficulty answering yes when asked, is life worth living? However, if you scratch the surface of the most adamant traditionalist, if you investigate the claims of those who are so quick to denounce Marxism or postmodernism while conflating them, you'll usually find that they are not merely against the far left, but against liberal modernity altogether. For instance, in an interview last year, the reactionary priest Roberto de Mattei claimed that the far left wants to destroy Christianity and its base, family, property, state, and religion itself. This nihilism is the essence of the new left. However, he also claimed that there were 3 dates in history that define the crisis that Catholics are facing today. The worst years, according to de Mattei, were 1517, 1717, and 1917. 1517 was the year of the Protestant Reformation, the year Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church. 1717 was the year the Freemasons formed the first Grand Lodge of England. Now, all I know about the Masons, I learned from reading Robert Anton Wilson, so I'll move on.
Many people always expect me to say something about the Illuminati since I first became famous or infamous for a novel about the Illuminati I wrote with Bob Shea, and then to compound my folly, I wrote a few more novels about the Illuminati on my own. The Illuminati was a secret society of the 18th century about which everybody disagrees because it was secret, and it was so secretive that nobody really can agree about what the secret was. Thomas Jefferson described them as enthusiastic philanthropists, which sounds like high praise until you know that in the 18th century enthusiastic meant half crazy. Half crazy philanthropists is what Jefferson was calling them. That they've been accused of being atheists, Kabbalistic magicians, sorcerers, Satanists, communists, anarchists, and just Jeffersonian Republicans.
I suspect this idea that life might be meaningless can't be pinned so easily to any historical moment, both meaning and meaninglessness are transhistorical abstractions. But these abstractions are always tied to a concrete historical reality, and that reality changes as we move through time. For example, Socrates might be considered the first nihilist in the realm of philosophy. That is, he could be considered a nihilist in the same way that early Christians were considered atheists. The Christians were thought of as atheists because they didn't worship the Roman gods. And according to Nietzsche, Socrates should be considered a proto-nihilist because he broke with Greek norms and values.
Now, Socrates was a revolutionary at his time. I'm not sure a lot of people understand how revolutionary Socrates really was. He basically went against all of what was formerly solid and foundational to Greek culture. Socrates, with his equation, reason equals virtue equals happiness, was basically saying that you can't rely on instinct to do what is good. You have to use reason as a deciding force in your life. You have to cast all of your instincts into doubt and reason about them to see if they're good or bad. And Nietzsche says that basically this idea that you have to cast your instincts into doubt, reason about your instincts, and then through this rational deliberation, you can discover virtue. Nietzsche says that that is a sign of ill health, and I agree with him.
Let's say that it's true that Socrates was a bad sign for Athens. Let's grant Nietzsche, Debussy, and others like him their argument that you can trace a nihilistic line through history. You can find a series of ruptures, these moments when what had given life meaning falls apart. If Socrates arrived on the scene as a symptom of the sickness of Greek society, can we also say that he was the cause of the sickness? The German idealist Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel also thought of Socrates as a disruptive force, although he, like Nietzsche, greatly admired him. Hegel saw Socrates as a product of his time, of his civilization or society. Hegel wrote that Socrates' interventions were only possible in the Athenian mode of life, where most of the work, which is now done by free citizens, by a free republican and free imperial citizen alike, was performed by slaves, seeing that it was deemed unworthy of free men. It was because Socrates had the leisure to wander around in the marketplace, engaging in long conversations, that he could disrupt and undo so many of the assumptions and conditions that had created him. What's more, while critical of Plato's version of dialectics, Hegel grabbed hold of this dialectical method and aimed to supersede it. Hegel wanted to go beyond Socrates' claim to know nothing, beyond mere negation, to a concrete absolute, or to a practical philosophy that he felt could be acted out through the state. Marx, on the other hand, claimed that what was absolute or good or just was the active force of man's creative power moving through history and acting upon the material world. For Marx, life had meaning because men created meanings through their collective labor. For him, the reason the world appeared meaningless or without spirit was because men had given over the power to organize their collective labor to a mere abstraction. According to Marx, the capitalist value of labor is bare and without quality. It is purely quantitative, but it is also real and moves through the world and history. It's interesting to note that both Marxists and reactionaries believe that the liberal world of merely technological progress is a flat, bland, and alienated affair. Unlike the reactionaries, fellow travelers of Marx, people like Mark Fisher, point to the failure to negate the world as it is, the failure to realize nihilism, or to transcend this world into a new world, for the depressing meaninglessness that seems to surround us. It is as if the world of liberal modernity is one held in purgatory, in stasis, stuck in between.
It's impossible through words to describe what is necessary to those who do not know what horror means.
But even if we grant a vision of a socialist future, there is still a transhistorical problem, a transhistorical nihilism or problem of meaning that I've been skirting.
If you're smart enough to know that you're here, you necessarily realize that you will someday die, that you could die at any time for reasons that you could never anticipate or control, or that from a purely biological point of view, you're no fundamentally more significant or enduring than a lizard or a potato. You wouldn't be able to stand up in the morning if that's all you thought about. What our ancestors did, rather ingeniously, albeit quite unconsciously, is to solve the problem of how to manage the existential terror that is engendered by the awareness of death, which is in turn an unanticipated byproduct of our vast intelligence through the construction and maintenance of what the anthropologists call culture.
The problem for meaning is death. We're born, live a while, then we die. To tackle this and resolve it, we might have to do a sidestep. Taking it head-on seems impossible. But if we reframe it, if we reframe this problem of death, we might be able to resolve it. In his book, In the Dust of This Planet, Eugene Thacker tries to escape this problem of the finite, the problem of human existence, by considering not death, but the world. Thacker's aim is not to imagine the world as it is for us, not to imagine it as something that grounds our life and that we can manipulate for our own purposes, nor to understand the world as an object in itself. Scientific inquiry reduces the world to facts, to a kind of material substrate that is purposeless, and in terms of meaning, we're left with the merely human. The world in itself as an object becomes the world for us once again. But Thacker believes that, quote, the real challenge lies in confronting not the world as it is in itself, but the world without us, and understanding why this world without us continues to persist in the shadows of the world for us and the world in itself. What Thacker is pointing out is that the unknown and unknowable, the world as it will exist after our own death, for instance, is a concept that we can't help but formulate, even as it frightens us. Whether we think of this world without us as God's domain, or in some as yet undefined secular way, we rely on this world without us, this unknowable eternity or abyss, not only to overcome a fear of death, but also to make sense of the world of life. If we can fully grasp this idea of the world without us, we can start to understand why some liberal solutions to the problem of death seem hypocritical and empty. For instance, terror management theory is an attempt to tackle the problem of death precisely because this terror leads to us clinging to an idea of a world without us. The aim of terror management is to encourage dispassionate reason to overcome instinctual or automatic reaction to the fear of death. In order to be moral, we have to have recourse to reason, and this means we have to put aside our tribal identity, our culturally cultivated affinities, and perhaps even our religiously defined sacred values, and think through a truly human and inclusive response to existential threats in the world. However, if the world without us is necessary for our self-understanding, if we must rely on some ultimate values, some imagined eternity, in order to function, especially when faced with death, then terror management and the insistence on reasoned humanistic morality will not work. If we want to impose humanistic morals, if we want to expand the realm of the human to include people who aren't like us, people who don't have the unacknowledged sacred values of the liberal, then we can't merely retreat to morality, but have to instantiate new values. We have to reconceive of the world without us. And in order to reconceive of this world, we'll have to face the obliteration of our current selves. We'll have to pass through, rather than deny, meaninglessness. Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, you might click on that subscribe button and the bell. And if you're interested in reading more about these topics, I'd suggest that you pick up copies of either Mark Fisher's Capitalist Realism or Eugene Thacker's In the Dust of This Planet, or both. You might also consider supporting us on Patreon. We're now offering patrons access to select Zero Books titles and the opportunity to join in a monthly Zero Books Club discussion group online.